Okay, I needed to unmute myself. All right. Going to present. Everyone can see the slides okay, I imagine?
Yes.
Cool. Thumbs up from Pedro. Awesome. All right, last one. Thanks for sticking through, everyone. I am Tori. I'm on the configure team. I work on that stage. I work on that stage with Maria. It's comprised of two groups, which is orchestration and system. Within those groups, we work on things like auto DevOps, Kubernetes management, serverless, infrastructure as code, as well as a number of other areas. Today, I'm going to walk through a bit of our Kubernetes integration, as well as our Kubernetes management tools. Mostly, I'm going to talk about our EKS support. In 12.5, we're launching the ability to create an Amazon EKS cluster directly from GitLab, and EKS stands for Elastic Kubernetes Service. We currently offer this for Google, which utilizes GKE or Google Kubernetes Engine. And if you hear me say GKE instead of GDK, often this is why, because they are so similar. So to go over the business goal, we want to provide this functionality because 85% of enterprises use multiple cloud providers to meet different technical or business needs, and we want to capture those. And we got this number from an IBM survey that they did and released. There's also a lot of customer value here as well. We wrote a blog post on why GitLab is supportive of a multi-cloud platform. And there's multiple benefits like workflow portability, which creates a seamless workflow while not locking you into a single vendor. There's greater flexibility in choosing the right tool for whatever job you need to accomplish. And this is important because different vendors offer different services. There's also increased resilience, which means that you can set up a failover architecture, and then that if in the event that one vendor goes down, you can still stay up. Also, just building Kubernetes clusters is pretty complex, and it takes a lot just to get set up and running, and we want to reduce that complexity for users. And lastly, even though 85% of enterprises are multi-cloud, the majority of them lack efficient management tools for managing the different cloud providers that they may be utilizing. So looking at it from a job to be done perspective, we can say that as an operator, I want to be able to easily provision Kubernetes clusters from my cloud provider of choice while reducing management complexity so that I can utilize the necessary services offered by those providers. So to give an overview of what we currently have in before 12.5, you can select create a cluster. You then sign in with your Google account and authorize whatever account you have there. It's slow because it's my local environment. It's not usually this slow. And then you have a number of fields to fill in, like the cluster name. You select what project to choose from Google, and then there's a number of optional fields, and then you can create the cluster. So if you haven't seen the cluster flow before, it looks like this, and it's fairly quick and seamless compared to creating it manually. So to understand what was needed to add an EKS integration, I started by manually creating a cluster via their AWS console. And I did this really to understand what all the requirements were needed in order to create a cluster, as well as just learn about the creation process in general and the terminology that AWS uses as well. We already had a defined UI that I just showed and a flow to mimic, so there wasn't too much UI to play with here for our first iteration. The biggest aspect that we had to work on as a team was really understanding the technical limitations and constraints. We needed to know what prerequisites were needed from the user, which fields were necessary to complete the flow, and what we could auto-populate or default to make it easier for the user. So the new functionality, you are able to either choose Amazon AKS or Google GKE. And we followed the same flow as much as possible for EKS as we did for GKE. But there were a number of constraints that we had to work with here. First was that Amazon doesn't have the same OAuth flow as GKE. It's actually a lot more complex and less user-friendly, unfortunately. It requires that a user create a provision role, and the easiest way that we found for us to help the user with this was for us to provide the user with an account ID and an external ID that is associated with GitLab. They can then take that back to their Amazon Web Services portal, create the role name, and then provide us with the Amazon resource name in order to authenticate. Another constraint was just within the creation form itself. There's a number of prerequisites that users have to create, such as an additional role, a key pair name, and a VPC, and those all have to be created within Amazon itself. So just to, these were all brand new terms to me, so to give an overview of what they are a little bit, an AIM role allows EKS and Kubernetes to manage resources. The key pair name is necessary in order to create nodes, and the VPC is a virtual private cloud that enables you to launch resources into a virtual network. And we're trying to mitigate this and make it as friendly as possible by directly linking to the correct area within AWS where you would create these things, and then also providing our own additional documentation to help guide users if they get stuck. There's also probably double the number of required fields that are necessary to create a cluster on EKS as there was for GKE. So that's another constraint. So you can see here that the form is twice as long, unfortunately. In terms of fidelity and current iteration, the first iteration is actually live on GitLab.com as of about 2 days ago, I think. So you're able to try it out yourself and reach out to me if you have any questions or suggestions. Again, the most difficult aspect here were the parts that we have less control over, and we want to continually improve our documentation to help make sure that it's easy to understand and that users know what prerequisites are needed in order to create the cluster. If you have any other ideas or thoughts, or you've worked within similar constraints before, I would be interested in hearing your ideas. So I wanted to also give a brief overview of some of the other cluster management issues that we have in progress. The first one that I'm linking here is an advanced setting to delete all of your Kubernetes resources on cluster removal. So this basically means that when you have a cluster within GitLab and you don't want to utilize it in that project anymore, you can remove the integration along with all of the other resources that are created in order to reuse that cluster for another project. And this is really helpful because a lot of the times we hear that users want to add a cluster to a new project, but something will fail as they try to install an application because it's already installed and hasn't been removed from their cluster. So if you're removing the integration, here we'll give the opportunity to remove all of those resources that GitLab has created as well. We're also providing more flexibility in the naming of namespaces that are within your cluster. This is a more advanced setting or use case, so we're starting the MVC by allowing the name change directly within the CI YAML file, so it'll just be a field that you can fill out there. And there's also constraints around whether the cluster is managed by GitLab or managed by the user themselves. And so we've had to implement some failover techniques that allow us to fail the CI job in case that the namespace, we're not able to actually edit the namespace for the user. And lastly, we are providing an additional way to manage cluster applications. So currently, you're able to manage applications directly within the UI, but there's a lot of ops teams that are moving towards infrastructure as code, And infrastructure as code means that you're utilizing the same techniques that you use for your application. So that means that you're utilizing merge requests, you have code reviews, you're using commit messages, you have a history, same sort of techniques that we are using every day for GitLab.com. We want to use that for the infrastructure of projects as well. So this way allows you to select a project that will be managing your cluster files, such as charts and other files that are necessary for managing applications. And then operation teams are able to use like merge requests, and if there's a bug in one of the charts, they can roll it back similar as you would any other repository. Cool, that's the last slide. So if anyone, I think we have like 4 minutes. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
I have a question. Do any of our competitors, I mean, I could probably look this up, I guess, but do they already offer an EKS integration?
Yeah, there are competitors that offer, there's multiple, I'm still waking up, so my brain is, and I also feel a little bit sick today, so my brain is not working very well. But there are other competitors that offer EKS integrations.
And do they have the same flow where you get kicked out to configure everything?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's like a requirement of having to set up an EKS and cluster. Like there's no way around it. And also authorizing with Amazon, it's unfortunately, and we've also reached out to Amazon to try and improve their docs, but we're trying to take it into our own hands so we can improve it on our side. Good question.
Before, so like for those who don't know, before working for GitLab, I used to work for AWS, and like basically what you did there is basically what everyone has to do. Mm-hmm. And I think it's pretty hard to explain why it's like that, but it's basically because AWS is so focused on building the primitives of all these services, you know, that they never really kind of like think about like, hey, let's create like an out way of authenticating like these services, you know. And I think they probably will get there someday, but yeah, like everyone who integrates with Amazon has to do all these crazy things of going and creating IAM roles and like producing keys and secrets and whatever. So it's unfortunate, but it's what it is.
It's also it's more secure, and actually Google's moving towards this way as well. So we may be forced to change our Google Auth to be something more like what we have to do for Amazon.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Any other questions?
Oh, yep, I just had one more. Does Amazon and Google, do they have documentation that links back to us so that users can look at their documentation to figure out how to set it up on GitLab?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I don't think Amazon does, because this is brand new integration, and I haven't seen it on Google, but I'm not sure. I know that they've linked to us as a partner, but I don't know if they have documentation about like using GitLab. I'll have to check on that.
Gotcha. I just wasn't sure where you would go, like what your first thought would be, to stay on GitLab or go to AWS to look for this kind of documentation. I'm not sure.
All right, cool. We are just about time. Great, amazing job, everybody. This was amazing. The presentations were killer. You guys did a wonderful job presenting. Attendees, you did a great job asking questions and listening and participating. We really, really appreciate it. A reminder, if you have any questions or follow-up, please put them in the agenda documents or reach out to the presenters directly, and they can help answer any questions. We will be opening a retro issue for our first showcase, so we can collect some feedback and talk about what went well, what didn't, what we think we could change, so we continue to iterate on this. But it was an amazing job, and thank you again to everyone who presented. It was awesome. have a wonderful rest of your afternoon, evening, or morning, or whatever it may be in your part of the world. And we'll see everybody soon. Bye.